So we're going to do without the flashy intro today, and we're going to dive into it. So today we've got Jamie Bunn joining us. Jamie, my executive coach. I nearly said Jamie Bunn, executive elite, Jamie Bunn coach, but it's really just Jamie Bunn, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly, you could consider yourself an executive elite, couldn't you? So, and that's the name of my actual business. But yeah, my brand name and how everybody knows me is Jamie Bunn because, yeah, I learned a long time ago in coaching as much as you might try to sort of divorce yourself from a company name and try and get that brand going. Really, in the end, if you're a coach, you're known by your name, and that's your brand. Which
absolutely. So awesome. Obviously, as I said, you and I know each other a little bit, but there's a whole lot that I don't know. So tell us a little bit about your background, like in terms of, not everyone is an executive coach, and most people wouldn't know how you would end up in that position. So tell us a little bit about what got you to here.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I think if I go way back to the 90s, which really dates me very quickly, in the late 90s, I was lucky enough to be a part of a founder group of people who set up a startup internet service provider, or what we used to call an ISP back then. And that was, as you know, and as I'm sure everyone who's listening knows, the energy and the intensity of the startup land was great. And we were selling internet connections, and we ended up selling that business in early 2000 to a company called Optimises, and they still exist now. I think they used to be a full-service telco, and they were trying to compete with Telstra and Optus, but now I'm pretty sure they just do internet. But I thought I was, to be honest, pretty special. I was, just around sort of 25, sold my first startup. I thought, how easy is this? And,
you probably had hair at the time too. You probably had hair at the time too, right?
Not much. I thought you said you weren't going to sideswipe me.
Sorry. That's a one and only stitch up.
That's fine. The baldness went along with all my money because I then. The baldness and my hair went along with all my money because I invested all that money in the internet, in stocks, in tech stocks, because I thought that's what I knew. And of course, the stock market had been booming, and then we had the bust of 2000, which you probably most of your listeners are too young to remember or experience, but it was devastating, and stocks just fell through the floor. And suddenly, a portfolio that I'd amassed that was doing really well, suddenly I'd leveraged it a little bit, and that leverage then became 300% of the value of the stock. And so I had no business. Wow. I'd lost. Not only lost my money, I'd now acquired a debt. And so it was a real reset button. The turn of the century was a real bugger for me. It was a real reset, but it was beautiful and purposeful, as we all, eventually learned in hindsight, because it was in 2000 that I thought, okay, so what the hell am I going to do? Well, what do I know? And so I looked to other startups and founders and general managers and CIOs in my network, and I started talking to them, and trying to form an idea. And coaching didn't really exist back then. It was, it was something that was vaguely forming in the US. Certainly in Australia, there weren't many instances of it. To the point where I wasn't really calling myself a coach until actually a mate of mine who, coincidentally in 2000, I started jiu-jitsu, a yoga school, and Buddhism, in the sense of pursuing it vigorously and reading and meditating, and all those values all came into it. And my graphic designer, who I knew through the jiu-jitsu school, said, "You know what? I think you're a coach." And I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. And so then between 2002 and 2002, I went about forming this coaching business, working out, what I needed to do, what were the things that how we were going to get qualified, and looked at all the various different avenues. And it was a bit like the Wild West. It's probably not too far from the Wild West now. It's still not a highly regulated industry, but at least it's more well formed and understood. Because they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I needed a job, and I needed to find a new way, because everything else was scorched to earth, because the tech industry then was it had contracted rapidly.
Yeah. And
so from then, I launched into it. In the first couple of years, I was really lucky. I got a couple of founding clients in BMW and Fairfax, and they went on to be clients for BMW for about 5 years, and Fairfax for about 15. And I just acquired other clients over the years, and really I first started off focusing really on the energy, and I called it sort of energy coaching for startups and startup founders, and that was where I bought a whole lot of I guess the combination of Eastern and Western technology and understanding and philosophy over those years to help with the energy. As you know, as a founder, if you don't have heaps of energy, you can have the best ideas in the world, but you can't execute on them. Yeah. And so, that was the initial focus. And then from about 2005 moving onwards, that sort of then became more around a module or around self-leadership. And so, as you know, yourself, Bill, I focus on, how I still ask all my clients now, how's your energy, how's your stress, and talk about the pillars of performance to maintain it. And then on top of that, I now do obviously leadership and high performance and strategy stuff. So that's a snapshot. That's a snapshot.
That's crazy. It's interesting that you went through the. I actually didn't really know that about the tech stocks and 2000 and so forth. It's funny because I started for the first time 12 months ago having a little bit of expendable income. Not a whole lot, but I'm like, oh wow, I can actually start investing in things and started to amass. Last year, 2021 was fantastic for tech stocks and for Bitcoin and for Ethereum and for whatever you want to put money into. And then we've got a real snap back to reality kind of over the last 3 months, and it feels like it feels very similar. I mean, well, I wasn't there, I was there, but I wasn't there. I was 15 or 16 or whatever it was, 14. I was probably behind the back of the bowling alley, sneaking beers and lighting our first cigarettes and stuff when I was 14 years old, rather than worrying about tech stocks. But do you see anything familiar in terms of the market at the moment, in terms of how hot tech stocks are and what's going on with kind of like the mini reset right now?
Lots of similarities. When you're looking at economic corrections, there tends to be some telltale signs, and certainly, I guess the riskier elements of the marketplace start to wobble a little bit. So, for prior to the tech bust, there are also other indicators. I think one of the biggest indicators I remember where I started getting really worried and unfortunately didn't act on some instincts. But I remember in '99 when I got into a taxi and a taxi driver was giving me stock advice. It's a bit like I guess now. If an Uber driver gives you cryptocurrencies, and it's not necessarily that the cryptocurrency, in my opinion, is here to stay, and it's going to revolutionise the monetary system, but it's establishing itself, and it's not mainstream. You still can't. Well, it's very hard to buy a coffee using Ethereum or Bitcoin. Yeah. Some progressives do it, but it's establishing itself. And so, the more vulnerable parts of the economy, which are the more volatile areas, tend to start to get the speed wobbles first. And, crypto is one of those indicators. I think, already the property market, it's, starting to get some speed wobbles. And, it's also just human nature. And we have very short memories. Yeah. And as a result, as a population, we repeat the same mistakes, every sort of 20 or 30 years.
Every generation.
So, absolutely. Because as you said, Bill, you were 15. And you weren't really taking it in, and then you've got 50-year-old bull blokes like me saying, "Hang on, I remember this," and you're like, "No, we can do this."
That's right.
I do see some similarities, and the nature and the size of the course correction. I don't know what it's going to be, but there's definitely there always is, and there always will be. We know that property can't keep going. We know that stocks just can't keep flying. So there'll be a course correction, and then a consolidation, and then it'll start to grow again. But having been through the scorched earth, and one of the things about bushfires, when they scorch the earth, you still get new saplings and you still get new growth. So, it's not going to be terminal. It'll be, in my opinion, just a course correction. And those would, exactly. And it's a reboot. You haven't lost everything. You've just cleaned out all the crap.
No, for sure. So, good stuff. Let's talk about high performance, because obviously, like you mentioned, that was the first thing that you kind of delved into, and what you kind of, I feel like, hang your hat on today. And like, when people think of an executive coach, a high performance coach, so on and so forth, it's a very open idea, very open industry. What is, in your opinion, what is the key to being a high performer? The keys to making sure you get the best out of yourself, the keys to excellence, I guess?
Yeah, well, wow, that's a big question. So I guess, I like to use frameworks, and I like to chunk things and make them really accessible and bite-sized. So the first thing I recommend to anyone who's, wanting to reach high levels of performance is to understand that it's not just about you. You are an important component in it. But, your high performance is about recognizing and integrating yourself, which is the first stage, then your team or others around you, and then your ecosystem or your business. So there's those three levels of high performance. And I think it's a really helpful lens to look at leadership, to look at even personal resilience and sustainability, because with personal resilience and sustainability, it's obviously a component of high performance. Most people, when you talk to them about resilience, personal resilience, they'll talk to the things that they need to do for themselves, whether it's, the 4 pillars of performance, like I talked to you about, in terms of eat, sleep, exercise, escape, which is all valid. But when you dig a little deeper and ask people, what are the main sources that drain their energy and drain their resilience and drain their ability to sustain? They talk about others. They talk about people. They talk about the relationships and the influence. And so it's senseless not to interact and engage on that level. So high performance is about understanding those 3 levels and then being able to integrate across all 3 of them. It's also important to get a point of focus. What we know through some great educationalists like Angela Duckworth, who wrote about grit, and as a result, success. She examined school children and found that really the 2 biggest factors, not the only factors, the 2 biggest factors were focus and persistence. And those 2 things transcend talent and socioeconomic background and education, quality, all those things, focus. So you need to find your focus. You need to then pursue it just relentlessly. And that sounds easy, but the devil's in the detail, because what is your focus? Simply saying you want to be wealthy or you want to make money is just not enough. That's a metric. That's a side result, and I think that a lot of people get confused. You don't want to cite a metric as the vision for yourself. And I hear a lot of businesses talk about growth is their vision for growth. Again, I would argue that that's a result. That's not a vision in and of itself, and it's certainly not enough to draw your sustained focus. And so what we know from high performance research is that really the best focus comes from the intersection between three elements, which is passion, purpose, and curiosity. So when those three things meet, that will draw your focus. And being able to find something that can make money that is at that intersection is the key if we're talking about executive high performance. Obviously, if you're an athlete or you're a soldier, there are other manifestations, but ultimately athletes, if they're wanting to be a professional athlete, they'll make money from it. But of course, not all the top athletes in the world are professionals, and nor can they make money from it, because a lot of sports are amateur. For instance, it's very hard in jiu-jitsu to make money. There are some great streamers and, some small minority of the population who can make money from it. But on the whole, they're mainly amateur athletes who are having to find other sources of income. So, I mean, those would be, some of the real keys to high performance. And then what you've got to do across those three levels that I talked about is find your flow triggers. So flow is that state of mind where you're in a high performance state, which every athlete seeks, and the Navy SEALs seek, and really any executive should try to pursue it on a day-to-day basis, which is when your mind's operating at its best. And across those three levels of self, team, and your ecosystem are these flow triggers. There are generic ones, but then there are specific ones. And it's a really interesting area that, you and I have talked about. There's some amazing brain scanning technology that's being used at the moment for neurosurgery that I'm looking into adapting for people like yourself, Bill, in terms of getting a brain map and a pathway for your own performance. So it was a big question, and I gave you a big answer. I hope that's okay.
It's the biggest question, absolutely. And you've given us plenty to draw from there. But the interesting thing, when you talked about the example of somebody coming in and saying, "Hey, look, my goal and my vision is to be wealthy, or my goal and my vision is growth," and so on and so forth. How I was interested when you mentioned the fact that one of the overlaps in that, would you call it a Venn diagram, whatever it was curiosity. That was quite interesting to me. So, but say, for example, somebody comes in as an executive and they're a high performer and they're at a fast-growing startup, or they're at a enterprise, or they're in corporate, or whatever it is. The things that you mentioned talk to somebody's why, their passion and their curiosity and so on and so forth. But in an example where they're not out to change the world or to build a new industry or so on and so forth, how do you get people to align with that core vision and the why inside of themselves to be a high performer? It's because it wouldn't be easy, right? Always.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's questions that a lot of people don't even ask themselves, and so as a result, the sustainability of performance comes under question. Why the passion, purpose, and curiosity need to draw your focus is because they create a sustainable energy. So, as everyone does, if you're doing tasks that are boring, that you are not passionate about, that offer no sense of challenge, that don't give you a feeling of propelling yourself further forward, there's only so long that you can do that. And so, and you see it quite a lot in a lot of the consulting firms, the big consulting firms. And I've seen a lot of people spat out of those big brand name consulting firms. They go in and they can work for 3 years. And you would argue that they're working to a higher level. They are smart people. They're producing great results. But after 3 years, they get burnt out. And it's because they haven't been pursuing those intersections. Because if they were, when you're curious about something, there's an amazing resilience that can come from that. There's an amazing pursuit of curiosity that we find as human beings, and of course things that we're passionate about as well. And so they feed our ability, and then they'll also feed the right behaviours. So if you're wanting, like I am, to do jiu-jitsu at 50 years of age, knowing that I've got a target on my back from 25-year-olds, there's a whole lot of ancillary exercise that I have to do outside of the actual jiu-jitsu in order just to be able to sustain my ability to do that. Now, I'm not particularly passionate about doing weights and chin-ups and boxing. Like, I wouldn't argue that I'm passionate about it, but it really feeds. But I am passionate about jiu-jitsu, and it really feeds back to me being able to do jiu-jitsu on a sustained basis. And so it drives the right behaviours, even though it's not necessarily something I'm passionate. I'm pretty curious about high performance nutrition and strength and those sort of things. But in terms of doing the weights and all that stuff, that's really just driven by my purpose. And so you'll find a way to fit the right behaviours, the right mindset in behind that triumvirate of drivers for your focus, and it'll create a sustainable future.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like the curiosity part, because I feel like, well, especially I can only talk from my own personal experience, but I wake up every day curious about what problem to solve next, and figuring out the go-to-market strategy at Athyna, figuring out how to develop this new product, figuring out how to craft a brand that's, loved around the world. And it's all these, it to me is a never-ending work of art. It's a never-ending set of problems to solve. And I mean, as I said, I'm only talking from my personal experience, but I would find it near impossible for me to ever get bored and lose kind of passion in what I do. It's actually super nice. But that leads into the fact that, like, for me especially, and you know this, like, I kind of go too far in the extreme of passion and curiosity and excitement and purpose and so forth. And I feel like, and you mentioned earlier, the 4 checkpoints that we do when we're on a call every day. We start eat, sleep, exercise, escape. How do you make sure that the people that you're working with are able to balance that? Because again, speaking through the lens of a startup founder, you do sacrifice. You have to sacrifice some. You don't have to sacrifice everything, and you have to be mindful of the fact that you need the 4 things that I mentioned. But there are some sacrifices that most startup founders will make. But how do you make sure that people are looking after themselves from an emotional level, I guess, and continuing to be a well-rounded human being?
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, it's about a sustainable schedule, and a sustainable schedule comes from, as you've just pointed out, a holistic perspective. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the business performance, I'll reference back to some of the work you and I have done. Remember, I really drove home hard about having a vision, a mission, and strategic objectives, and the fact that they need to be continually fed and organic and practical and usable. And I know that you've debated internally on a ongoing basis what the vision of the business is and what the mission and associated values and principles. Well, you've got to do that for yourself as well. And so, most startup founders, the easiest way in is to start to do that stuff with them around their business, because their business and themselves are a bit blurred, and they're, as you said, highly passionate And you've got to get that architectural framework up and running for your business. And equally, I would argue that for individuals, you've got to do it for yourself. So you've got to set a vision for yourself. Where are you going over the next 10, 20, 30 years? It's that endpoint that allows you then to start to articulate a framework by using retrograde analysis of how you should be living across the board. And because when you talk about a vision for yourself, necessarily you start to talk about your body, your mind, your business, your relationships, these things which all are incredibly important. And Harvard finished this awesome research project about 5 years ago, which ran for 75 years. And it was all about happiness. What makes you happy? And surprise, surprise, the biggest contributing factor, again, not the only factors, but the biggest contributing factors to people's happiness was the sustainability of their relationships and their core relationships that they had over their life. And so if we can assume that everyone ultimately would like to be happy and happy with whatever they've produced and how they're producing, relationships are key. So you've got to integrate those into your sustainable schedule. So by creating a vision for yourself and a mission, which is your non-negotiable values, behaviours and beliefs, which articulate how you want to be within the context of mind, body and business and relationships, then you can start to, from there, ladder out some of the behaviours and the scheduling that you need to do. So one of the things I encourage people to do, particularly around relationships, is use your diary. We use it for important meetings at work, but, you know, not many of us use it for our for our partner, our wives, our husbands, or whatever nature our core relationships take. And then also for, children and, best mates and so on. And make sure that whatever you articulate in your vision and mission is represented in your schedule and experience. And then work can fit in very neatly to that sustainable schedule.
Yeah. I actually know the study that you're talking about. I've seen there's a TED Talk on it, really famous TED Talk that cites that study, and it's so funny because it's the simplest. Like I think one of the questions in that study or one of the through lines was the biggest regret being working too much and not spending time with friends and family. And I mean that's so blatantly obvious. That's just like living life 101. But again, only speaking from my own experience, like I find it so easy to put the blinders on and be like, this is what I'm doing. I'm building this thing. I'm passionate. It's all I care about. Like it's funny how we all know at our core, and we all know like consciously that we need to be surrounding ourselves with our loved ones and making time for yourselves, but we just still get pulled into like hyper psychopathic work mode. It's just it's funny because what you mentioned is really similar. I did a really great I guess you would call it a short course with Michael Batko, CEO of StartMate. And it was a productivity course, and it was really good. It was like a self-serve course delivered on Notion. You got small groups of like really interesting people that you would meet with every week and talk about the module and so forth. And so it was a productivity course. And the first module it's actually the second module, but like the very start of the course was all about your relationships. And it was about, like you mentioned, trying to go to building in non-negotiables into your relationship. So like starting from your loved ones, like you're closest to your partner, your mum, your dad, your brother, siblings, whatever. And okay, what's the cadence at which I want to maintain these relationships? And having like Saturday night for time with the partner, every Sunday I'll call mum. And then it went to like next set of relatives, like your closest friends, your next level of friends. And it was very much building in the time and locking it into your calendar, as you say. And it was quite a powerful exercise, and it definitely echoes what we all know, but I think what we find still a little bit difficult, especially me.
Same.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Well, I think sure, go.
You sure? Because I mean, you're about to hit off a really good reply. That I don't want. I don't. I don't. Yeah. So yeah, continue, please. I'll go after. Yeah.
Okay. What I was going to say was, you've heard the statement, I'm sure, or the idiom, everything in moderation, including moderation. And what I would say is, to that end, it depends on the stage you are in your business and the stage you are in your life. So, if you've got a startup that you're taking to, to a scale up, hopefully, and you've got no kids, you've got the ability to travel anywhere in the world, you've got a unique proposition. Does any of this sound familiar, Bill? And then you would argue that you would argue that, at this stage, all things considered, it's a bit like, if you're president of the United States, it's term limited, and it's probably the biggest job you're ever going to do. So you are going to make some sacrifices for it.
Yeah.
And
it's
so,
your 8-year term.
I think that,
to be engaged.
Yeah. And so, I think that you're allowed to be a fanatic at times. The key is, don't be fanatical for the next 75 years, because if you do that, you're gonna have a very myopic experience of life.
I kind of have to bring you back a bit to the flow state thing. So I'm such a nerd. So the first time I ever heard about it, I was so excited, like, I can actually get into a mind state where, and I was like, shit, I've been in this position before and everything. But then the question is, like, is it possible to stay in flow states like more times than not? Because like for artists and I don't know, people who don't have training, it's like something that happens to you, not something you try to orchestrate. And I think I've seen the chart, the skills, or is it capabilities versus challenges, and then sometimes it's like there's some times where it's like it's not that feasible because sometimes some challenges are bigger than you. So how is it possible to keep that flow state when the challenge is bigger than you and you don't have the time to upskill yourself, that sort of thing?
It's a great question. I think that it's possible to be in flow 24/7. And nor is it necessary. Depending on what your job is or what you're doing will determine obviously how important it is for you to be in that. But in terms of sustainability, probably the best example are the Navy SEALs, the US Navy SEALs, because what we know about flow is the level of consequence of what you're doing absolutely informs the likelihood of how much you're going to get into flow. And obviously, if you're a US Navy SEAL, and I mentioned that because they've been doing research on this for a good decade, which I've been following, and it's really fascinating. Whilst they're not doing the brain scanning stuff, I know that they're looking at it because the company I'm dealing with are talking to them. But they do a lot around brain stimulation and so on. But they've got it harder than most, but in somewhat easier than most to sustain high performance, because obviously people's lives are on the line. So they're looking to stay in that state for long periods of time. And so that's when they use flow triggers and looking at those three levels. What can they do for themselves? What can they do with the team? And what can they do in the environment they're in order to create architecture to give themselves the most likely chance of sustaining that flow state. And so there's in the moment stuff, but then there's preparation stuff, and there's stuff that you can do outside to encourage yourself to get in it. So, one of the best things to do on a regular basis for flow state is meditate. And with technology these days, and I know I've talked to Bill about this, but there's a Muse headset, MUSE, which is like about $350. It actually uses brain scanning technology to give you data feedback while you meditate. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to firstly get data. So the great thing about Muse headsets is that up until now, the feedback that you've got from meditation, for thousands of years has just been internal qualitative data, which is, it feels okay. I think that was a good meditation, and I really felt like I was in the zone. Well, now, with the Muse headset, you can do it. So, for instance, I use it every day, somewhere between 3 minutes and 30 minutes, depending on how much time I have. But you're getting data to tell you, yes, you're in flow. And so when you're in flow, you can then scan your body, scan your environment, and work out, okay, what am I doing here that I can in order to, experience flow on a more sustained basis. Yeah. And so you've got to educate yourself. But, doing that versus, waking up and having, 6 beers, for example, which is more likely to put me into flow and take out some of the randomness. We know which ones are going to promote flow. So, exactly. Yeah. So, but when you're a startup founder, you want to probably be in flow as much as you can, but that means getting really proactive about your sustainable schedule and the behaviors and things that you need to do in order to give your brain a chance to get into flow. So most people experience flow by happenstance. They just sort of, including professional athletes for that matter, they might do all the training, but the rigor around it's obviously a mind state. Yet it's amazing how small a percentage of mind management a professional athlete's life is. It's mainly eating, sleeping, training, those things. Whereas, your brain is the thing that's the governor of all of those. So, I guess in summary, it's not possible to be in flow all the time, nor is it necessary. It is possible to maximize your own state of flow by getting a sustainable schedule around you that is full of flow triggers and full of all the right behaviors which support flow in order to give yourself the best chance of realizing it.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really toned down. Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, so leading on from performance, obviously you said when you started coaching it was really around performance and energy and so forth, and then you also mentioned leadership, which is something that I've always been obsessed with. Leadership, I feel like I never was able to be the captain of my local football club, but always wanted to be, and I was always thinking I'm not that good of a footballer, but how can I be a really great leader? But I've just always been interested by it, and then now obviously it's my job as a founder and CEO. So, what do you think? What do you think are through lines of people who are great leaders?
Well, firstly, I think there's a lot of misdirection out there, and I mentioned Harvard earlier, and I love Harvard Business School in the way it's validated research, and in fact, the core leadership model that I subscribe to is a combination of Harvard and Daniel Goleman's work around emotional intelligence, and there's a preeminent paper called Leadership That Gets Results, and that was published about 20 years ago. But he identified 6 styles of leadership, and of those 6 styles, really 4 are the most important. And so, if we're talking about leadership that works and leadership that gets results, and thematically, what is leadership that is effective, then that's a great identifier of traits. And it's basically being visionary, being democratic, being able to coach, and being empathetic. Coaching and empathy are obviously tied, but they are different. The empathetic style of leadership is around understanding someone's mind state and deciding whether or not to coach them or whether or not to console or nurture them. And so, you as a leader would be making these decisions intuitively. And I think that, leadership that gets results and focusing on those 4 styles are things that you see throughout. Having said that, I started this response with Harvard's got a lot to answer for, or they're responsible for some misdirection, because they also promote very much and I know this through direct experience and also experience with some of my clients, and that is they promote the extroverted, charismatic style of leader as the answer. And in fact, it's that really proactive. You ever been in a Harvard workshop? Everyone's got their hand up. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone wants to, stand up and be heard. And whilst obviously that style of leadership has its moments, if you look at most of the successful, largely successful, hugely successful businesses around the world, interestingly, most of their leadership is centered around introverted leadership and leadership that is around. And now, introvert, extrovert, they're loaded terms, and a lot of people have got, a very polarizing answer too. But before I go any further on this answer, I would say that firstly, we're all introverted and extroverted to some degree, and if we're not, then we're probably hospitalised in a mental institution with one or the other extreme state. So we all experience it, and we all can be either more dominantly introverted or extroverted, depending on the environment and circumstances and how we're feeling and all those sort of things. So, but what we know is that, as a CEO, there's huge power in being dominantly introverted in the sense of drawing on the strengths of what that does, which it's all about the intimate connection. So the more introverted leaders are really strong one-on-one. They listen very intently. So introverted is consider. They deeply, deeply listen and connect with people. They deeply consider. They don't just jump into decision-making. And they don't give reflex responses and reflex answers and high-risk responses. And from my experience over the last 20 years of coaching, a lot of startup founders are actually deeply introverted in that they're deep thinkers, they're intelligent, they like to connect with people. And the extroverted elements, and you can actually learn those in terms of being able to stand up in front of people, being able to, more readily respond and think on your feet. Those skills can be acquired. It's much harder to acquire the deep thinking, the slower approach, the intimacy. Yeah. And so I think that, what we picture in our minds as a hero canon of leadership has been shaped a lot by, popular media,
fiction,
and YouTube videos and things like that. And for that matter, for Harvard. But really, to me, I think that, if we're to summarize in terms of what you're looking for in great leaders is the ability to be visionary, democratic, coaching and empathetic, and then also to be a deep thinker and mindful and focused on the relationships at work, focused on really clear thinking and great answers rather than quick answers and bold ones.
Yeah, no, that's great. So normally to wrap the show, Wallo throws us a few rapid fire questions. So we know we're going to get you out of here at some point, mate. You got people to coach and lead us to shape. So I'm going to pass it back over to Wallo and to wrap us up.
Okay then. Jamie. So nothing too hard. What is? I can see a couple of books, so this might be hard for you to decide, but what is your favorite book right now?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about high performance, there's a great book that's written by a guy called Sim Kotler, who's probably at the foreface of high performance. And it's not his latest book, which is really cool as well, but there's a book he wrote called Stealing Fire. And Stealing Fire is picks up on a whole lot of themes around humanity and high performance. And it's one of those books that, I just found, really, really inspiring. And it burgeoned a whole lot of other readings, including his latest books, but other books. And so probably Stealing Fire is one of my favorites.
Yeah, very catchy title. I'm like, what could this book mean? Like, what's this about? Okay, so what's one tool that you can't live without? I can give you a reference though. I usually mention this. One of our guests said her favorite tool was breakfast. So like you can go and say anything. It could be your Muse headset. It could be anything. Yeah.
I mean, you've nailed it. Well, it would have to be my Muse headset because it's such a unique tool that I know is making me better every time I use it, and I miss it on the days that I don't. I wish I could say I used it 100% every day, but I'm probably at 90-95%, but I really, really miss it. And I think probably that's a good indicator, isn't it? Of whether it's, it's when you don't have it, how much do you miss the tool? And that's the one.
Yeah. Okay. What advice do you have? Do you have any advice for tomorrow's entrepreneurs? People who don't know everything that you know.
Oh God. I mean, I think honestly, dare to be different and be yourself. And, and I guess coupled with that, just be mindful. So, there's such opportunity now, like compared to 20 years ago, obviously when I was a startup or a founder myself, compared to now, there's just such great possibility out there and that the internet's obviously facilitated that, finding that triumvirate of passion, purpose and curiosity and making that the core of, who you are and what you're pursuing means that, if you do that, there's just such a great probability that you're going to succeed. And I guess the one caveat to that is don't underestimate the right timing. The right timing will overcome the worst resources and the wrong timing will overcome the best resources. So get your timing right as well.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me send it back to Doc to wrap us up.
So Jamie, look, appreciate you coming on the show. Awesome to talk to you. Where can people find out more about you? If people want to get in touch, if people are, wanting to up their performance, I guess, like how do people find you?
Oh, well, just contact me through my website, I guess, jamiebunn.coach. That's got my deets and everything. Alternatively, you can email me direct at coach@jamiebunn.coach. It's a pretty easy email. I think that's the best. Or maybe they can reach out to you, Doc. You can be my business development manager.
Great. Sounds good. I'm a pretty good sales guy, to be honest.
Yeah.
Bit of a profit share scenario. Sounds good. All right. Well, Jamie, as I said, thanks a lot for coming on the show. And from our end, that's a wrap.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Cool.